Being a Civ fan is truly the gift that keeps on giving. This series has delivered nothing but wins for its fans. Regardless of our personal tastes, every single game has been met with critical acclaim and a bigger audience each time. Currently, Civ 6 is the single most played strategy game on Steam. This is truly bizarre when you think about it. Think about other similar flagship strategy games from the 90s and 2000s. Aside from Total War and anything by Paradox, these franchises are all dead or way past their period of cultural relevancy. But not Civ. Civ continues to knock it out of the park, and all of this success applies to multiplayer as well. The CPL started with Civ 3. It had a ranked ladder and a thriving bi-monthly tournament scene called the CCC, Clan Challenge Cup. Civ 4 and Civ 5 were massive multiplayer games in their prime and still have devoted player bases. But Civ 6 is breaking records. The first esports organization to sign a Civ player started with Civ 6. Check out this tournament page with pictures and text that were totally not created by AI. And streams of the Civ World Cup routinely get six-figure view counts. This is a game that you might associate with a casual, single-player experience, but it has a rich multiplayer history, and there is interest in watching competitive Civ. So, in single player, this is the most popular strategy game in the world right now. It has a history of popularity as a competitive multiplayer game, and it is growing more popular than ever. And Civ 7 is coming out soon. Where does this lead? Can Civilization become an esport? To help answer this question, I've analyzed some of the most popular esports. I will also compare using Civ 3, Civ 6, traditional sports, chess, and poker. We might also compare to StarCraft or Age of Empires. We'll see, what are the barriers that might stop a 4X game from becoming an esport? We're also going to dive into the existing Civ 6 multiplayer scene and see what we can learn from it. Then, we're going to look into the future. For Civ 7, what things make me hopeful and excited, and what things make me concerned that the series may lose the competitive spirit of the game in pursuit of a more casual audience. Let's get started. But before that, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Suede, I'm a huge fan of Civ. I currently hold the top spot on Civ 3's multiplayer ladder, and I've done great work designing and balancing some of the Civ 3 mods that we play nowadays. I know a ton about the franchise, and I've got a unique perspective. Subscribe to my channel if that interests you. We will start with the things that people say categorically exclude Civ from being an esport. Let's nip one thing in the bud right now. If you're saying Civilization can't be a spectator sport because it's turn-based, think again. For one, since the introduction of live play multiplayer, Civ has typically been played with simultaneous turns. This gives Civ 6 elements of real-time strategy, which has a proven history in esports. But moreover, two of the most popular spectator games in history are chess and poker. These are both strategy games, and they are both turn-based in some sense. Now, in live-action sports, turn-based contests like bowling or archery tend to be much less popular. But this has to do with their interactivity, not their turn-based nature. American football is a good example of an interactive sport that is structured based on simultaneous turns, and I don't think it gets held back by this at all. In fact, I think a turn-based game would have an opportunity to offer something new and refreshing. On the flip side, first-person shooters are very popular in esports, while shooting and archery are not popular sports in real life. But I guarantee you, if they turned archery or shooting into an interactive, simultaneous turn event at the Olympics, viewership would go through the roof. Although, so would disfigurement. I think there is demand for turn-based strategy esports, something where the player has to move and think fast, but where insane APM is not mandatory, and the average viewer can understand what are the inputs that the players are making. But this does bring us to issue number 1, interactivity. Ideally, spectator sports are interactive at all phases of the game. You're not just watching two people perform independently and then measuring their results. Each competitor should have the opportunity to interact with their opponents in a number of different impactful ways throughout all stages of the game. A lot of people like running, but few people would watch a running tournament on TV. On the flip side, most Canadians like myself never put on a pair of skates, but we still love to watch hockey on TV because it's super interactive. Honestly, maybe a little too interactive. This is the area where a lot of turn-based strategy games struggle. Games like Heroes of Might and Magic 3 often have a few hours of building followed by an epic showdown at the end. Some versions of Civ end up like this too, like the QC mod for Civ 3 or free-for-all games of Civ 6, but most entries and mods, like team games of Civ 6, tend to have a bit more skirmishing. Overall, Civilization is not the least interactive game out there, but we do fall a bit short of every major spectator sport and esport, aside from golf and maybe Formula 1. The good news is there is absolutely nothing stopping a turn-based strategy game like Civ from being designed in a more interactive way. In chess, for example, you can engage with the enemy as early as turn 2, and real-time strategy games often have skirmishing and kill threat starting very early in the game. This is 100% something that can be fixed, multiplayer modders just need to keep it in mind. Especially when it comes to victory conditions. Space race and cultural victories are just not very interactive, sadly. Factor number 2 is game length. Players only have so much stamina, and viewers only have so much patience. If you're looking to play or watch multiple matches back to back, this is especially true. Now, I said for interactivity that absolutely nothing was standing in Civilization's way. I do not think that this is true for game length. It's a common misconception that Civ 5 and 6 are named after the number of entries in the franchise, but it's actually because multiplayer matches of these games can last upwards of 5 or 6 hours. We can make things faster for sure. Civ 6 uses online speed, which speeds up the game to an extreme degree, and it causes distortions. For example, units do not move any faster, so by the time you assemble your army and put it in the enemy's land, your units are often already obsolete. And the length of the tech tree can also be an issue. Civ 6 doesn't have this issue so much, but for example, in the MPT mod for Civ 3, players stop teching at map making and mathematics. In Civ 4, often it ends at construction or feudalism, and in team games for Civ 5, often they end in this grinding trench warfare situation of knights and crossbowmen, where the whole lobby has nearly zero science. We could make changes here, make multiplayer mods that only last one era, to make for shorter, complete games. But it starts to run into a barrier that is the way that Civilization is marketed. It is supposed to be a celebration of human history, spanning from the Stone Age to the Information Age. The game has an epic scope by conception, and that's great for playing by ourselves. But there's a reason that more people watch the 100-meter dash than the marathon. In fact, games of baseball have gotten longer in the past 100 years, and people have linked this to the sport's decline in popularity. This is a significant challenge for Civ as a spectator sport, but if players really want Civ to be more like an esport, it is something that we can overcome. So these are the two big issues. Other problems exist, but they're more problems with specific games and not problems with the 4X genre. But there are some other factors that are important for esports where Civ actually excels. Obviously, the player base is huge, and I think with better balanced starts and a healthy pick and ban system like in Civ 6, balance could be pretty good for a game with this much going on because of the hidden information. Civ also has great and unique opportunities for spectacle. Spectacle is just when something looks really cool and exciting. So for example, sports like skateboarding, figure skating, and gymnastics are not interactive at all, but they offer really exciting moments. Canal cities, sneak attacks, landings, and the effective use of off-meta units or civs could make for memes, discussions, and clippable moments. And there's something else. If you watch a lot of fighting games or MOBA esports, eventually the matches will all start to look the same. But the variety that comes from the random map generation of the Civilization series is the ace up our sleeves. This is what keeps the game infinitely replayable in single player, and it's the reason that we will never get bored of multiplayer Civ. We're just constantly dealing with the weirdest map setups and having to adjust to them on the fly. It's a lot of variation and randomness, and I know some people will say that Civ is too random to be competitive, but games like Poker, Magic the Gathering, and Hearthstone have a lot of luck too, and they still manage to be popular and skill-expressive spectator sports. If anything, the luck adds to the spectacle. So these are the pros and cons. What are the takeaways here for making multiplayer Civ 7 more fun to watch? Well, with game length, something's gotta give. You cannot go caveman to Cosmos in a viewer-friendly match. I would suggest something like what we do in Civ 3. Make different scenarios for each era. This might lose some people because it violates a fundamental selling point of the game, but it's a necessary sacrifice, and if needed, you can chain these scenarios together during tournaments to provide a simulation of the whole tech tree and of human history. So what gives me cause for optimism? Well, Civ 7 is doing exactly that. The game is segmented into eras by design: Antiquity, Exploration, and Modern. Casual viewers will already be primed for era mods when they check out multiplayer. They'll see it, and it will instantly make sense to them. The website for the game explicitly advertises single-age multiplayer games, which suggests that they will have better support. Herson has a video saying that he thinks that this will compromise long-term strategic planning. But I think that most multiplayer players, and definitely most multiplayer viewers, would prefer something equally strategic but more compact. It might not be exactly what some long-term fans want, but it's something new with a lot of potential for upside. Also, from what I understand, Civ 7 will remove workers and tile assignments for citizens, allow some sort of stack movement again, and mostly get rid of unit promotions. This means less to micro, and potentially faster games. Even after that, the cool moments might be pretty far apart, so one thing that I'd suggest is bigger games with more players. This is another area where Civ 6 made great progress. You can have up to 12 players in a game. For viewers, it guarantees action. The more players there are, the more there is going on at all times, even if the game does go for several hours. This could be similar to a lot of Battle Royale games. Each individual player's feed doesn't have too much action. It's a lot of running around, hiding, and looting things, and each player will only get, on average, 1 kill in a game. But by switching the perspective of the broadcast, there's always something exciting going on for the casters to have a look at. Having bigger maps with more players also helps with variance. It's the law of large numbers. The bigger the team, the more games that are played, the more a player's RNG averages out and becomes irrelevant. That being said, reducing variance is also possible in other ways. Combat RNG in Civ 6, for example, is a lot more normalized than Civ 3. There's less variation. And modes that promote balanced starts, like Modern in Civ 3 or BBM in Civ 6, can also remedy this significantly. Right now, we've reached the point where I'm most worried going into Civ 7. PC versions of the game seem to have small maps, and feature a smaller maximum number of players. 5 for Antiquity, 5 for Exploration, and 8 for Modern. 8 players for Modern is workable, that's the maximum in Civ 3, but a player cap of 5 is awful. That's not even an even number. These numbers are reduced, by the way, if you're playing on a console. People can play 2v2 games of Civ 3 or Civ 6. It's just usually a strictly worse experience, and so it's not something you see as often. Now, in some other games like Age of Empires, 2v2s are quite popular. But unless the multiplayer in Civ 7 is radically different from every single other installment, this will make the game worse, and broadly hints at the idea that they're prepared to throw the competitive side of multiplayer under the bus in order to make a product that appeals to casual fans. How about interactivity? Multiplayer isn't at the top of the charts for interactivity, but that could change. League of Legends had a whole season of games where no one would fight until their base was collapsing and the game was already over. Until they patched the game, and pro players started skirmishing again, because there were better incentives to interact with the enemy. This is another area where Civ 6 has already made improvements. A lot of the appeal of Civ is in the construction of buildings, but buildings were fundamentally uninteractive. In RTS games like StarCraft, buildings exist on the map. They can be targeted with harassment, sieged, used as walls or high ground vision by the player who builds them. They can be placed somewhere safe, they can be hidden, or they could be placed near the enemy's base as a proxy. In contrast, buildings in the older Civ games were just hidden in the city center, and you couldn't target them except with precision bombing. Pillage strategies seem kinda toxic, but they're actually great to watch. They allow a way to punish players without forcing them to lose cities, which is usually catastrophic in Civ. But the pillager gains nothing from it, so it really only becomes meta in zero-sum games like 4v4s or 1v1s. Civ 6 introduced dynamic rewards for pillaging. You can get faith and science and culture from it. I think this is a great improvement that rewards people for getting scrappy. Movement options are also very important for allowing playmaking and interactivity. You might think that increasing movement speed of the best land units would fix this, but doing that also helps you retake and defend vulnerable cities in a pinch, paradoxically discouraging you from making plays. Mod designers need to add additional playmaking tools. Crucially, boats, helicopters, Civ 3 helicopters, not Civ 4 through 6 helicopters, which are glorified land units, and things like the XCOM from Civ 5 with its massive game-ending airdrop range can help do that. And if invasions come fast, it's also more important to fight to contest vision, leading to even more skirmishing. With enough variety of playmaking tools, the mod makers can balance things so that it's easier and more lucrative to make plays instead of sitting back and building forever. Let's talk a bit about victory conditions, because in my opinion, these are essential for delivering both spectacle and interactivity. I'm sorry, but cultural victories are not interactive. Being ahead of someone on culture does nothing to drive interaction, except to the extent that you're like putting the ball in their court. Come kill me or lose on culture. Only score victories are more effective for this kind of tie-breaking purpose, because higher score means planting or taking cities. And if you have more cities, you are opening yourself up to being attacked. Space race and cultural victories are fun to play in single player, but they're not as fun to watch. In terms of good victory conditions to build your multiplayer scenarios around, in my mind, the two best options are combat and conquest, or victory points. Victory points could be earned through skirmishing, exploration, treasure hunting, piracy and raiding, religious missions, so many cool things that would be fun to watch. Imagine this, you get treasure from an encounter with a minor faction, and you want to bring it home for the sweet, sweet victory points. But your enemy is trying to stop you. They want to steal your treasure and claim the victory points for themselves. That would be really cool. You could add archaeology, trade monopolization, city-state missions, and all kinds of cool things that would produce victory points in an interactive way. And it would be interactive without the enemy taking all of your cities and eliminating you from the game, which tends to be a feel-bad moment for casual players. But this lines up perfectly with what we've seen from Civ 7. We said it will have 3 eras on release, so 3 multiplayer scenarios. I'm thinking Antiquity would be slamming unique units into each other's faces. Modern Era would be every single type of warfare mixed together, with plenty of high mobility and high range options for explosive plays. And Age of Exploration would be the treasure hunting victory point contest. But you can go beyond this, to make combat-focused games more exciting. Civ 3 has Regicide. Regicide means that if you lose your king, you die. It leads to explosive moments like this. Literally explosive. I blow up Indonesia's king with cruise missiles, he instantly dies. I don't have to chase down every city he's ever planted, and he doesn't have to hang around and watch me cannibalize his empire. No escape settlers here. You can see the purpose this serves for making a tighter, more decisive play experience. Of course, Civ 7 would not use this exact mechanic, but what Civ 7 will do is introduce a crisis at the end of each age. These are an opportunity. They can force a reasonably quick, decisive end to multiplayer games. Now, you might have noticed that I'm using a lot of footage from Civ 3 in this section, and you might be wondering if I'm coming at this with an agenda. I love Civ 3 to death, but I'm not fucking delusional. I know that the game has a bunch of mechanics people don't like, and that its popularity is tiny compared to Civ 6. Civ 3 is not the future of multiplayer Civ. But it is proof of concept. This is real. We play this every day. You can have a turn-based strategy 4X game with a ton of strategic depth, exciting playmaking, crazy builds, action all over the map, with a maximum time commitment of only 2.5 hours. Civ 6 fans, this is your call to action. You could have all the stuff I just listed, but for your game, the one that everyone actually wants to play, there is nothing stopping Civ 6 and Civ 7 from being like this. I know you get a lot of pushback from casuals about BBG, and big changes are scary to people, but using mods to get the game where we want it to be is essential. Newer, more radical mods can also coexist, because there will always be demand for more traditional, classic mods, like the Better Balanced Game mod. And that's the last point I wanted to bring up, community input and modability. Let's face it, Civ games are designed primarily for single player. Multiplayer is at best an afterthought, and at worst, a janky feature tacked on as a way of putting more marketable crap on the box. I'm putting Civ 3 on the screen right now, and I used to be embarrassed by how janky our game was, but Civ 6 is somehow significantly more janky. Like, I've had some rough drops on Civ 3, but at least you don't have to have 9 people share their screens before the game to check if they have the right mods. You spend 40 minutes setting up, you play for 80 minutes, one person disconnects, another has to go, and suddenly there's a scrap vote. 2 hours? Just to end with a scrap? Buddy, if we were playing Civ 3, we could have scrapped like 4 games by now. I feel for the Civ 6 players on this. You guys are chill for staying positive through it, and it's not your fault. The situation is actually really embarrassing for a AAA game and the most popular strategy game on Steam. Maybe I'm just blind to the technical side, but if Fortnite can fit 100 players into a game without zero ping issues that crash the lobby, I imagine that a brand new $70 game could do a small fraction of that. Everything to work through this jank has come from the community, both social innovation and technical innovations. The devs have a few options to get this right going into Civ 7. They can hire people who have experience playing multiplayer Civ 6, they can listen to the community and do what we want them to do, or they can make the game more moddable and get the hell out of our way. But for the love of God, they need to do something. It goes without saying, but this game can never be an esport if it turns into Relobby Simulator halfway through every single stream. The Eras system does give me hope for modability, but as for listening to the community, we'll see. It was announced that the game would not include hot seat multiplayer. This is a good yardstick, since it's part of a frustrating trend where developers are removing support for things like split-screen local multiplayer. Based on the response in their livestream, it sounds like they're at least pretending to listen to the feedback on this issue, but still, this is a TBD. So, you can see that there are some pretty big obstacles that we'd have to overcome here, but becoming an esport is a possibility for the series going forward. I'd like to take a brief moment to shout out broadly the multiplayer community. I have so many amazing stories, I've made so many amazing friends, and it just connects me to such a rich history that goes well before my time. It's also incredible that the Clan Challenge Cup started over 2 decades ago, and it lives on through Civilization 6. And the scene is still continuing to evolve. In many ways, Civ 3 is better now than it has ever been. I know any people listening right now who are die-hard fans for multiplayer Civ 6, you might be a little worried. With Civ 7 coming out, your game won't be the center of attention anymore. But I assure you, the story of Civ 6 and of your community has only just begun. And that as long as you continue to pour your heart into it, multiplayer Civ 6 will live on. Cheers. See you on the other side of the map.